Back. Welcome back, everyone. To see some faces here. Let's see. Nice. Thanks for coming back. So we're joining today to go over our next topic. We will do a little bit of overview of our board governance to make sure we get all that content in, because we could talk about that for a long time, right? Oops. Let's get people muted if need be. And then we will hop into program design, management, and evaluation. We are joined today by our interpreters, Ada and Manse, and they will be providing interpretation today for those of you that request that down below with that globe. You can request which language you'd like to listen to. A quick reminder also to go ahead and add to your Zoom name or Zoom handle your language preference. You can do an EN for English, you can do an SP for Spanish, and you can do a BI for bilingual. And that'll help us because we're going to have a breakout session. We'll have breakout sessions throughout, and we'll start off with one pretty soon. So I want to make sure we get you all in the right groups. And we're delighted to have everyone back. Recording has started. I will go ahead and actually turn it over to you, Jean, to say our thanks to our sponsors. We'll move to that slide.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And good morning, everyone. And I'm sorry I missed you all last week, and happy to be returning this week. Jean Tedrow with the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, she, her, hers pronouns. I'd like to take a moment to thank our partners and our sponsors, Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium, CARI, FIRED, the Duke University Studies Program. And so I turn it back to you, Rebecca and Lisa, to introduce your team as needed. And thank you. And I'm going to go off video and mute, but I'll be here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jean. Hello, welcome family. Welcome back to our day 3 of our Nonprofit Management Institute. I know you all remember our production and program team, but I'll introduce ourselves again. I'm Lisa Reed, Chief Learning Officer. We have Rebecca Beck, our Education Manager, Leslie Morales, our Nonprofit Services Assistant, working with us behind the scenes, do all those tricky tricks that you see happening to keep it moving smoothly. Just as a reminder, again, we have our safe space to brave spaces. Just a reminder to be respectful of each other in our spaces that we're in. So I won't read it word by word. This is our 3rd session together. By the time you get to this, you'll have it all memorized, and just you'll have now know the protocol. So we thank you again for being here, and let's move on. Today's agenda, as you can see on the screen, jam-packed again today. We're going to do a brief overcap because a lot of the feedback we got last week about board governance, I think we sort of moved quickly through some of the material at the end. So we want to make sure we go back and recap a few things. So here's the agenda that we'll go through for today. Again, as a reminder, make sure you have paper, pencil, pen, and markers. You're going to be drawing again today and showing us some wonderful illustrations as Dr. Palmer goes through our lessons for today. So with that, I hope you have your coffee, donut, whatever keeps you going in the morning, gives you energy. Hope you have it nearby. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rebecca to get us going.
All right. So we're hoping to do a little warm-up session here with everyone, asking you to use that annotate feature, which is hopefully available to you in that top bar. You'll see view options, and you can go down to annotate. There's 2 options, I guess. You could do an annotate and write in on the map here where you're located and what your county is maybe known for. We get some really interesting information from folks in the chat to share with us what your county is known for, if it's known for anything. So that's a nice way to get us warmed up for today's session. So I'll give a couple moments. I like seeing all this populating in the annotate. Love to see all your names popping up, lots of hearts and stars. X marks the spot. And we'll see if we get anything in the chat here from folks regarding what your county is known for.
Type it in the chat, everyone. What your county's known for? North Carolina Zoo, Randolph County,
Oh,
Fort Bragg. Agriculture, rivers, Devil's Tramping Ground. Okay.
Hmm.
A&T, Duke. Lakes and parks. Birthplace of Iron Mountain.
nice.
Ooh, it's going so fast. Our country, huh? Temple Theater.
With some of these, I'm reminded of what's in our state,
Greenwich.
you know,
Yeah.
you kind of forget sometimes.
Mhm.
Furniture. Joe
Good ball.
Pascal.
Love it. That's great.
Thank you all for chiming in
Yeah.
on this. And hopefully we're all picking up on some new things. There's some things I'd not heard of before that are showing up in the chat.
Home of many HBCUs, Bull City.
Lots to be proud of.
Uh-huh.
That's great. Well, good. Well, thank you all for participating in that. It's a nice getting to know you exercise that we hope to do more of those as we go. We'll go ahead and clear the annotate. Thank you, Leslie. And we will go ahead and introduce our breakout sessions. Dr. Palmer, would you like to do that?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and it's good to see all of you back today. We are going to do a recap, and this is typically what we do after the board governance session. Typically, there's quite a bit of questions. Oftentimes, there is, when we get to the end, in terms of 2 activities or exercises that we have, oftentimes we start this session off with a little bit of a recap and referring back to those things. So we want to make sure that we cover all the things that we had hoped to. So what we want to do to begin our work today is we are going to use the breakout kind of feature, and each of you will go into a breakout space. And when we left each other, we were focusing on, as I said before, board governance. And we know that there are 2 ways of thinking about how our boards of directors are providing support to the nonprofits that we represent. One is board governance, and the other is oversight. And so there are 2 documents or handouts in your workbook that I want you to turn to and use in the breakouts as a point of reference. The first one is the duties of duties of loyalty. I wonder why love is on the brain, Lisa. Don't know about that. But duties of loyalty, duties of care, and duty of obedience. Those are the kind of 3 focal points that we want you to reference in your breakouts. And then also you have a handout titled Oversight and Governance. So we want you to refer to that as well. And what we want you to do is to focus on 2 questions, same question, different focus. The question is, how does a board of directors demonstrate governance? And how does a board of directors demonstrate oversight? And you can use actual examples of your own board of directors if you would like. So again, when you go into the breakout rooms, you are going to spend time with your colleagues, and please be sure to introduce yourself and to share what organization you represent. The page numbers are 32 in English and 33 in Spanish, and 35 in English and 36 in Spanish. So those are your two, and let me grab mine too, just to make sure for the English one. So yes, page 35 and page 32 and 33 and 35 and 36 are your page numbers.
Pop those in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. And just real quick, before we go into our breakouts, oftentimes whenever we are working through our content, I like to do a check-in. And so I want to kind of do that a little bit here at the beginning before you go into your breakouts. So if you, how many of us are not familiar with the reactions function? And there are quite a few reactions. So when you click on reactions at the bottom, you'll get a whole family of different feature or emojis, I guess is what we would call that. And so give me a sense of just kind of getting started this morning. It is Tuesday. We're in April now. We were not in April last week. And so just give us a sense of just kind of what are you feeling this morning as we're getting started into our content, and use your reaction feature for me. And so Lisa and Rebecca, I'll ask you to just kind of help me scope out. I see Scott had a heart up there, and
Nice.
A lot of
yeah, I
thumbs up.
see some thumbs up. I even see some party animals. No, party people. Sorry, party people.
I saw a battery. Battery looks like it was maybe full or low. We're not sure.
Tranisha, I see you down there. We'll we are definitely all living out different realities, aren't we? And so while we know that the work that we're doing is I see a sunflower. I don't think I've ever seen a sunflower used before.
Who has a sunflower, right? They don't see that.
Was it Carla? It was Carla.
Huh. Oh yeah, I see it. It is,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I don't think I see it either. Huh. Okay.
Wow. Well, again, good morning. Thank you for helping me with that. That gives me a sense of, in a way, of where we are. So hopefully we're ready to go into our breakout rooms now. You're going to introduce yourselves, let folks know what agency you represent, and then have a discussion around how board governance is demonstrated and how board oversight is demonstrated in your sessions. And Rebecca has put that in the chat for you. In terms of just kind of getting us going as we do a recap, a little bit of a recap from last week. Rebecca, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the breakout rooms.
Sounds good. How many minutes did you want to give in breakout sessions? What are you going for?
15.
Okay.
15. Mm-hmm.
All right. So we'll gather back here at 10 a.m. Can you go ahead and open up the rooms? The main room will be for our bilingual Spanish speakers. If you're in the main room and you want to be in one of the English breakouts, just let me know and I can pop you in there. And a reminder when you come back from your breakout session to go ahead and select your preferred language down there with the interpretation icon. So we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. And I will go ahead and pop this breakout session instructions into the chat within the breakout rooms to remind you all. And are we selecting a sort of a leader for each group to report back a few, or no?
No, we're going to jump
Okay.
right into
Perfect.
another piece of board governance information. Yeah.
Great. All right, here go the rooms. We'll see you back in a few.
jumping right in this morning out of the gate. Again, good morning. And one of the things that we wanted to do, as I said before, is to begin this morning with just a little bit of a recap of last week. And one of the things that's important is understanding this distinction between board governance and board oversight. Now, each nonprofit board of directors has its own personality, has its own culture, has its own composition. And so in determining how you want the board to function requires us, one, looking at the bylaws. The bylaws gives us an idea of the responsibilities, which is that governance piece. And then to also kind of encourage our boards to shepherd the oversight, which is really the actions and related to reviewing and monitoring what's happening in the organization to maintain the mission and to work towards the vision. Each organization is different, which is why we wanted you to spend some time in breakout rooms, just so you can begin to kind of hear what you have in common with some of your colleagues in terms of how boards function, and then what you have, what is taking place with your board that is different. Again, each board of directors is different, each nonprofit is different, and while we offer a framework for considering the implementation of the work of your board of directors, we know that it varies from organization to organization. So in your workbook, you have various tools and handouts and information to help you to begin to make adjustments as you see fit as it relates to your organization. A couple of things that we want you to keep in mind as well. There are resources that are available in your local communities. In some of our communities, there are board development academies. Oftentimes our United Ways have what we call board project blueprint or a board development academy. I know in High Point, the United Way of High Point has a board academy or development experience to help individuals who want to serve on boards. They call theirs Project Blueprint. And then the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium, I'm in Guilford County. The Guilford Nonprofit Consortium has a board development academy. It is specifically related to helping existing board members and individuals who want to become board members. They participate in an experience that helps them. And what I've found, I volunteer with that particular academy. What I've found is that oftentimes we'll have executive directors and staff members who participate in a board development academy to learn more about how boards function. So in this institute, we designate one of our sessions to board governance and oversight, but there's so much more that you can learn and that you can add to what it is that we're sharing here. So again, check out your local United Way and see if they have such an opportunity. And oftentimes there's not a cost for that. And then also, if you're in Guilford County or if you're in, I think it's Brunswick County and Wilmington, or if you're in Forsyth County, if you're nearby some of those areas, there are similar entities that focus on capacity building for nonprofit organizations. I'm also going to let Rebecca, I don't know if it's you or Leslie, that will do some additional resources. There's a link that we have for you for a site called nonprofitexpert.com. There's another resource for you. And the other thing I'll say is give yourself time. Give your organization time to evolve in terms of your board of directors and how active your board members are, or how on point they are or are not with what their roles and responsibilities are. It is going to require that you continuously educate them on that. Sometimes when we have the founder of our nonprofits serving on a board, that can be a little interesting in terms of what might work for one board may not work for the other. But the goal should be to become as effective and active as we possibly can as a board, and to agree on what that looks like. So again, don't be too hard on yourselves when you begin to reflect on your board of directors and reflect on those areas that you want to enhance. Sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming because it may seem like that there's a lot of change that needs to happen with your board. But just take it one area at a time, one item at a time, and eventually you'll begin to see that change. But it's not a hurried type of process. One training isn't going to do it. One conversation isn't going to do it. It definitely has to be an intentional strategic effort to kind of help our boards to be and to function the way in which is in the best interest of the organization. So I just want to kind of say that, I don't know if the link is in the chat yet, but I'm hoping that it is. The other thing that we wanted to do, just a little bit of a recap on, is the accountability and evaluation of the board. And so team, if we could go to slide 10, I just want to, so this is a part of what we talked about last week. And I just want to remind you of the what you have in your workbook related to this information. So we've already talked about oversight and governance, page 35 for English, page 36 for Spanish. Then we provided a board responsibilities checklist. That's page 33, English, 34, Spanish. And then we provided in the workbook a board of directors job descriptions, page 36 and 37. And then board of directors versus the executive director, the same in terms of 37 and page 38. We also have one job description, a singular handout for that, and that's on page 38 and page 39. And then board chair versus executive director responsibilities is page 39 and page 40. The other thing that you want to maybe pencil into your notes or ink into your notes is that the board of directors is also very instrumental in developing a strategic plan for your nonprofit. In your workbook and in this institute, we will do a whole session on strategic planning. But we do want to make sure that you add that to that information, and you'll be getting, like I said, we'll do a whole session on that. And there is quite a bit of handout material in your workbook for strategic planning. One of the things, as I mentioned before, is typically when we do the board governance session, typically there's quite a bit of energy around that topic, and quite a few questions that are very individualistic in terms of your individual nonprofit organizations. And so definitely, if you have questions, don't hesitate to kind of share those questions with us. If I could go ahead to the next slide, which is evaluating the board and the executive director. So if you remember from last week, there were two kind of worksheet handouts in your material. One was the executive director position review. That's in the form of a worksheet, page 42 English, page 43 Spanish. And then there was a board of directors evaluation handout. And one of the things that we did last week is you filled that out. So you evaluated your board of directors in real time. So if I could have you to turn to that document, that is on page 41 and 42 in your material. And we ask that you evaluate your board using this evaluation instrument. And you can develop your own evaluation tool. There are some evaluation tools out there. There's a resource, some of you may be familiar with it. It's called BoardSource. They are a go-to resource for all things board of directors. And then our very own North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. For those of you who are members, you're able to access resources and material and information related to evaluating your board of directors. This particular evaluation, we developed it just kind of thinking about, what types of things might we need to be reviewing or paying attention to as it relates to our board of directors and how it does its work. And so what we did again last week is we had you to begin to fill out that particular evaluation tool and to do that, which is on page 41 and 40 and 42. If we could go back to the gallery, that would be good. So if you would, how far along were you able to get last week? We're going to give you about 3 to 5 minutes to go back and to finish completing that tool. And then once you complete that tool, we're going to go into breakouts. So I'm just going to give you I said 5 minutes, but it's probably going to be like 2 or 3 minutes. Go back to that tool. Again, it's on page 41 and 42. And complete that, finish completing that. Now, when you get to page 42, those are open-ended. The prompts are open-ended questions. And so if you kind of just jot down in bullet point form what your responses are, I'm just going to go just silent here for a couple of minutes and just let you spend some time completing the evaluation of your board of directors. And I've referenced all of the material in your workbook. You can reference that material as well as you're working to complete the evaluation. So what we're going to do at this time is we're going to go into breakouts, and let me give your question that you're going to be discussing. And so, a part of the intent as a result of participating in the Institute overall is that there will be takeaways that will help you to be able to enhance the capacity of your nonprofit as an organization related to the 6 principles that we're covering in the Institute. So for this particular exercise, we're focusing on the capacity of your board of directors and how, in your review of the evaluation and how you responded to the items in the evaluation. The question is, how should you now then enhance the capacity of your board of directors? Looking at the results, looking at what you have in front of you. And so in going into your breakouts, you're going to share the number one, right? The number one way that you are thinking you should enhance the capacity of your board moving forward as a result of completing the evaluation. So we're going to go into breakout rooms now. The time is 10:18. And Rebecca, we should come out of the breakouts at, I'm going to say 10:25. So 10:18 to 20, or it'll probably 10:19 by the time everybody gets in there. But
Okay.
10:19 to 10:25. And so
Great.
what you're discussing is how should you enhance or work to enhance the capacity of your board of directors? How should you enhance the capacity of your board of directors? And you're identifying the number one, what is the priority based on the results of your evaluation?
Great. I'll go ahead and open up the rooms.
Again, as I said, when we were going in our breakout spaces, we have to give ourselves time. And while you might look at your evaluation results and think, oh my gosh, when will we ever get to where we need to be? It is consistently working at this, just like with any other enterprise. It is consistently working, incorporating what we consider to be some of those fundamentals and also best practices to get us from where we are now to where we would like to be. In looking at those areas that you've prioritized, that number 1, 2, and/or 3 areas in terms of priority, take into consideration what resources do you need in order for you to see a shift in that particular priority. So what resources do you need in order for you to make a shift or see a shift in where your board of directors currently is with the priorities that you've identified? And what kind of training might your board need? What type of technical assistance might you and/or your staff need, depending upon if you're an executive director in this work group today? What type of consultation, or do you need some consultation? And when we talk about consultation and coaching, that's more or less, what knowledge don't we have? You might be looking at a priority and think to yourself, well, I don't even know where to begin with this. I need to be educated on this before I can decide if we need training or if we need technical assistance, et cetera, et cetera. So as you look at the priorities, and this is any of the capacity building needs that you've identified. We did an assessment 2 sessions ago where you looked at all 6 of those, the principles that we're going to cover, and you indicated where you currently are and where you would like to be, began to think about where you would like to be within a year's time. So this is one of those areas again, and it's just a matter of, I say just a matter of, not to simplify it, but it is a matter of identifying what is it that you want to focus on, what makes sense based on the culture and your nonprofit organization and where it is in its growth and development, and then proceed to address those things one at a time. Yeah, right. Some of those things you could do simultaneously, but again, just kind of think about it in terms of being a marathon and not a sprint. So it is, just taking our time and getting to where we would like to be. And so I'd like to leave you with that. The other thing is, and team, if we could, well, before I get to that, the other thing I want you to also make a note of is that if your nonprofit has paid staff, so meaning you have an executive director and or you have other staff in place, one of the things I think is important to remember, and I said this last week, your board of directors should be working in partnership and in collaboration with your staff. And executive directors, or if you are on the call, and board chairs, or if you are in this space today, keep in mind that the executive director is responsible for the day-to-day operations. And it is very important to be very, very clear about that. I know some of your organizations are only volunteer. They're volunteer-led, they're volunteer-run. That creates a different dynamic, but the principles are the same and the fundamentals are the same. How you carry those out is different because all of your folks are volunteers, but the fundamentals and the principles are the same. And each nonprofit gets to determine how you do it, right? You get to determine how you move into a space and place where your board of directors is functioning in a way that you desire. We also talked about board composition. The only thing I'm going to say there is refer to your bylaws. One of our topics last week was board composition, and we focused on the demographics and characteristics of your board, the size and shape of your board, the responsibilities of the board as a whole, your officers that make up the executive committee, the way in which your nonprofit should be carrying all of that out is in your bylaws. And if you're not satisfied with the demographics and characteristics, the size and shape of your board, how your executive committee functions, the way to make adjustments to that initially is to change your bylaws. And of course, when you're amending and changing bylaws, it is going to require the buy-in of the board because they have to agree to change the bylaws. So that's where you're going to find kind of big picture how the board of directors is supposed to function. And that's what we hold our board members accountable. That's how we hold them accountable. And there should be an orientation to those bylaws with every board member that you have. They should know what's in the bylaws because it describes and explains how the board is supposed to function. And that is one of those initial places where those changes should take place. The last thing I want to share with you just before we go into the break, and team, I want to get a little bit of a response back from our participants, and then I want to show that final slide that's included in our work. But if you could just kind of unmute yourself or use the chat. Again, this was a recap of board governance and oversight. And I just kind of want to get a sense of kind of where we are before we move into our new content today. Our new content is program design, management, and evaluation. So what are you thinking? Where are you? Give me a sense. You can unmute yourself. You can put it in the chat as we move out of the board governance and oversight session.
I appreciate the recap. I know I walked away last Tuesday with this still heavily on my mind, with lots of questions floating around. So I do appreciate us being able to revisit it again. I don't know the future structure of this program, but I can see 2 full sessions, 2 full in-depth sessions on this. And I mentioned to my team members that accountability piece is key. So just more support on the accountability, how to hold folks accountable when it comes to board, executive director, and the governance.
And Rebecca and Lisa, I don't know if we want to hear from the chat.
Yeah,
I
I'm
see
looking
it
over.
populating.
Yeah, it's going quick. Recap has been successful, super helpful, iffy, but work in progress. A long way to go with my board, but I have faith. Thankful for the revisit, enjoyed the session. Board has changes to make. Thank you. Insights helpful. Recap helpful. I think that's all of them. Need to assure that board is a functional board. Whoops. Long way to go. Self-assessment is important. Needed the recap. Makes me slow my impatience with getting it all right with the board. That's a good way up.
Great. And thank you all for that feedback. Kind of the final, my final thoughts around board governance and oversight. When we always debrief after every session as a team, and we debrief in looking at the evaluations, looking at your feedback, and what we try to do is make those adjustments in real time if we can. And so please, when we complete our sessions, provide us with your feedback, because that helps us to work towards making sure that you are receiving and getting the experience that you desire and the training and information that is helpful to you. So please, when we complete the evaluations and give us your feedback. So some final considerations that I'd like to share with you. As a result of our debriefing, we were able to just kind of capture some considerations that we want you to walk away with as it relates to governance and oversight. And so I'm going to have the team just kind of pull that up in a slide kind of presentation.
Dr. Pond, before you get going, Andre has a question for you.
Okay.
First of all, you're doing great. And second, I'm wondering if we'll be doing anything around staff and leadership development. He'd like to know.
We don't do that in this institute. We don't have a session for you specifically designed around leadership development. What I will say as kind of a nerdy academic around leadership studies, we try to embed elements of that in all of the topics. And so hopefully some of that'll come through as it relates to the leadership development piece. We do have a session on human resources, but it is more around personnel administration than it is around, let's just say, leadership development and staff development. I'm thinking you might be alluding to like soft skills and that kind of thing, or human relations skills. That is not what we do in this institute. This institute is management. And so we don't do as much around leadership.
He said, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So if we could just pull up, so here are some considerations as a result of our team debrief. And just kind of, and this will be provided, right, Rebecca, in the wraparound, right? Because this information is not in your workbook. This was as a result of our working with the group.
Ooh, sorry, I'm Trying
No
to show
worries.
this slide as a slide and my,
No worries.
here you go.
All
I
right.
will just share it as a screen here and not.
Okay.
There
Here we go. So in terms of thinking about board governance versus board oversight, think about governance as protection, right? We're protecting our nonprofit, and consider oversight as ensuring success, and that we reach our goals and that we accomplish the outcomes and the changes in our community that we desire. So under this notion of governance in terms of protection, we're going to steward the mission and the vision as a board. So we want to make sure the mission is present in our community. We want to make sure that entities that are important to us, that they recognize what our vision is. But to get there, we have to ensure that the work happens. So as a board of directors, that's what our focus is there. I've already said, partner with the executive director and evaluate the performance of the executive director. That's very important. Collaborate with the staff, partner with the staff. We should be working together and utilize the staff and the executive director as a resource. Share our skills as board members, share our skills, our knowledge and expertise. And what that does is it helps to provide the resources to do the work when we do that. That plays out in our committee work. And so that's an important part of what we should be doing. And then one of the last thing on our list, not the last thing, but the last thing on this list is to ensure compliance with legal requirements, and to expect the staff and or executive director should expect that the board of directors is holding them accountable, and that there should be a significant level of transparency in terms of how the organization is moving along to achieve success and to achieve its accomplishments. We could go on and on and on and on with this list, but we just wanted to, in our recap today, kind of leave you with this as we move out of the board governance and board oversight principle and topic in this institute. This will come to you in the wraparound information. So if you don't necessarily, if you're not able to capture this in real time, you will see this again. And if we could go back to the gallery. So we're going to take a break now. Our new topic, or our next topic, is program design, management, and evaluation. And if you could bring back with you that piece of paper and your writing utensils, whether it's colored pencils or colored markers or a pencil or pen, come back with those resources, because we're gonna utilize that as our point of reference. We're gonna do some work around specifically how you design a program, how you manage a program, and how you evaluate a program. So that's our new topic for today. The time is 10:41, and we will come back at 10:50, okay? 10:50 is when we will return. So I really understand and recognize that, because sometimes the work gets really hard, and sometimes it may even feel like we're alone in our work in terms of the mission and the vision of our nonprofit agencies. But rest assured, your communities are better because of the work that you're doing. And we at the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits are advocating for you all the time, as it relates to what's happening in our state, as it relates to the nonprofit sector. So just know that we are kindred in the work that you are doing. And so I think you should all give yourselves a hand clap, whether you use the reaction feature or whether you just outright do that, because you are appreciated, and we need you in our communities. And so we stand with you and want to be a resource for you in any way that we possibly can be. So thank you so much. Program design, management, and evaluation. Woohoo! we're going to move into what I consider to be the fun, exciting, make a difference part of the work that we do in our communities. And it's the programs and the services that we deliver. And so we're going to spend some time learning about why the design of a program matters, how to manage a program, and that big one, evaluation. And we're going to spend more time on evaluation than we are on the other two parts. So in terms of just kind of getting started, Rebecca, I'm going to kind of pass it to you with the Facebook poll. We asked in the Facebook poll for you to highlight one of your programs. And do you want to share the
Sure.
results? Am I at the right point?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right.
Go ahead and
Thanks.
share my screen
All
and
right.
show you all this. Where you can see our poll was asking about what aspect of programming do you find the most challenging, either design, management, or evaluation, all of the above, or none of the above. And it looks like we had about 50%, the most of them said that all the above is the most challenging. And then a few others that commented or posted here in the poll for the
And then it
individual
looks like
aspects.
it looks like we've got some seasoned folks when it comes to program design and eval, in the 10% that programming is not challenging for them. So hopefully for that particular part of our group, for you all, hopefully there'll be some things that we share that might be some tips or some ways that you can, some information that you can incorporate, or some ideas that you can incorporate as a result of the material that we'll cover. So, okay. All right. So if you would, in the Principles and Practices Guide, on page 17, we have outlined for you, as we have with all the principles, but we've outlined for you a description, right, of what we mean when we talk about program design, management, and evaluation. Is there anyone who does not have the Principles and Practices Guide at this point? I don't see anyone that doesn't have it. Does everybody have it? Okay. It's looking like I don't see anyone who doesn't have it. Okay, great. That's good. So when you look at program design, management, and evaluation, let's just kind of talk about what we have here in terms of the sharing with you. So we know that whenever programs are designed, that there are characteristics. I think someone put in the chat that they don't have the Principles and Practices Guide, and we're on page 17. Someone who doesn't have, did we put the person who doesn't have it, were you able to get the link in session 1? I think the team shared the link to the Principles and Practices Guide.
Yeah, if you haven't received that, you can go to page 27 in the workbook, and you'll see Principle 10. It may be 28 in the Spanish version. I think we're a page off in that one because there's obviously a little more content with Spanish. But page 27 in your workbook, you'll see the exact content that's in the Principles and Practices Guide for this principle. Yeah, no worries.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so
And I'm sorry, Dr. Palmer, I just want to make it clear in the Principles and Practices Guidebook, there should be, she's referencing page 17, I think is what they're thinking means 17 in the workbook.
So in the workbook, it's page 27. And in the Principles and Practices Guide, it's page 17, same information. Awesome, great. So we know that there are characteristics that are pretty relevant and or a part of most programs or services. Some of you may refer to your programming as services. Well, we mean the same thing. So it is the experience that you are delivering to individuals in your community as you have identified for your programs and services. And so if you look under build, we're talking about designing and implementing programs that align with your mission and vision to meet community needs. So in terms of thinking about program design, management, and eval, we start there. And then we pay attention to how programs are managed, meaning sufficient funding is available. We have the human capacity to do the work that we're doing and to achieve the outcomes that we desire. And of course, we've got practices to go there. And then in terms of sustain, we're providing credible evidence of the impact of programs. And that occurs through a consistent, framed out way of assessing and evaluating how we deliver and what we deliver as it relates to our programs, and are we making a difference? And so it is the programs and services that impact the lives, if we're talking about people, that impact animals, right? If we're talking about animals, or the environment, if we're talking about environment. But whatever that mission or purpose is, we typically are delivering programs or services, and we have to design those. And then once we design them, we have to manage those. And then once we manage them, it is important for us to have a process in place to evaluate our programs and services. And so we're going to do a deep dive into characteristics of each of the parts of our topic today. I asked you to have a piece of paper ready. Does everybody have their paper? Does everybody have, where are my artists? I know I asked this last week. Where are my artists? Who has the Crayola crayons? Who has the color pencils? Who has the color markers? Oh, one of my favorite, who has the Senate color markers? Who has those?
You going way back now.
Look,
I haven't seen those in a while.
I'm an old school facilitator. The flip chart. Who has a flip chart page?
Oh,
Lisa,
Lord.
do you remember someone had a flip chart page?
I do remember
during one of
that.
our sessions. Who has a whiteboard? Who's working from a whiteboard? Anybody? I guess one of the benefits of being virtual is you do get to kind of use some tools and kind of be situated physically in a way that you wouldn't be able to do if we were in person and in the same space or in the same room. So grab that piece of paper and grab your artistic tools or your artist tools. And I'm going to guide you through just kind of a hands-on exercise, okay? And there are different pieces and different parts to this, so be patient with me as we kind of walk through this exercise. This is hands-on, and so I want to make sure that we get the practical application to what it is that we're trying to deliver to you. So on your piece of paper, flip chart page, whiteboard, whatever it is that you're using, I want you to divide your paper into 3 columns, okay? So 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. Landscape, if that makes sense to you, is probably the way in which you want to turn your paper. And then just divide it into 3 columns. And once you divide it into 3 columns, I want you to name the first column design, the second column management, and the third column evaluation. So you've got your piece of paper. I've asked you to kind of use the landscape, I guess, way of looking at the paper. I've asked you to divide it into 3 different sections, 3 different columns, and design is one, management is one, and evaluation is the other. So I'll give you time to do that. Hold up your, if you can, depending upon what you're using. Perfect. Thank you, April. Thank you, Christy. Yes. Thank you, Andre. Well, look at Kim. Kim folded hers. She folded into like a trifold. Look at there.
I can't draw straight lines. I know my limitations.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. I hope, oh, hi, is it Hania? Did I pronounce that right?
Hania.
Hania. Okay, thank you for sharing. Thank you, Morgan. Let's see, who else? I don't want to leave anybody out. I think I see you, Leslie Patterson. Thank you for that. Don't want to leave. Is that it's the Latino Advocacy Coalition of Henderson. I saw yours. Yep. She folded hers as well. You know, Lisa, that's how I need to, that needs to be a part of my instructions. Just make a trifold. You learn something new every day.
Some of us may be challenged with even doing that, like me.
Exactly, exactly.
Lines are easier.
For sure. All right, so let's have some fun, right? I don't know about you, but I really, in the nonprofits that I work with, and boards that I serve on, there's nothing better than going out and being a part of delivering the program, right? And delivering the service, because we get to see in real time the impact of the work that we're doing. And it's always great to be a part of that work of a nonprofit organization. So I want you to do some drawing for me, okay? So I want you to just take a minute and I want you to think of a program that is current in the nonprofit that you represent, that is current, or a program that you want to start, okay? Or a program that you want to start, or a program that you admire, that you just think a lot of and that you know a lot about, okay? So again, just take a minute. I want you to either think of a current program that the nonprofit that you represent, a program or service that you that nonprofit delivers or that is implementing, or a program that you want to start, okay? Or a program that you admire, one that you just think is doing awesome work and all of that, and you know a lot about that program. In thinking about that, I want you to give me an illustration of the design of that program. I know that's a leap, right? That's a leap. Give me an illustration of how that program is designed, and you can reference the information that you have on page 17 in your guide, or the principle on page 27, okay? So I want you to give me an idea of what the design of the program looks like. And then I want you to give me an illustration of how the program is managed. Now, you can use words if you like, but I'd like to see more symbols. I'd like to be able to look at that page and be able to envision the design of this program, and envision how it's managed, boots on the ground, and then how is the program evaluated, okay? So you're just giving me authentically related to the program, either that is current with the nonprofit you represent, or a program you want to start, or a program that you admire, okay? So you're choosing that first, and then you're giving me an illustration of what the design of that program looks like. And how is it managed, and how is it evaluated? So how is it designed, how is it managed, and how is it evaluated? And I'm going to give you a few minutes to just work on that. And team, I don't know if we have any work music that we can share while we do this or not, but and we're going to stay in the gallery to do the illustration. So you are showing me how it's designed, how it's managed, and how it's evaluated, and you're giving me a picture of that. I'm going to give you just a few more seconds to kind of finalize your illustration. And try to make sure you fill in your design management and evaluation, fill it up. So just kind of imagine, I really wish this was true, that this program that you are sharing with me through this illustration, that you are in the running for $1 million. So you're in the running for $1 million. And I say, scan that and send it to me. Uh-oh, I see April is like, whoa, okay, let me add a little bit more to this picture. Because we know that funders oftentimes are trying to envision what they're funding. And it's difficult sometimes when it's just verbiage, right? When it's just a big long report or a big narrative, or sometimes it's kind of hard to see it and what it will look like when it's implemented. So just take a few more seconds to shore up your visual illustration, and we're going to get into some content related to that illustration. That will be your point of reference for the content that I'm going to cover. So hopefully you've been able to create your Picasso illustration of this program. And just kind of be reminded that you were choosing a program that is currently being implemented with the nonprofit that you represent today, or it's a program that you want to start, or it's a program that you admire, one that you kind of see, you see the implementation of it and delivery of it, and you admire that. So what we want to do now is we want to share with you, and we will be providing this as a link in the chat. We want to share with you our program design, management, and evaluation characteristic checklist. We want to provide that for you. And so we're going to go away from the gallery view, and we're going to populate this on the screen. So this is not in your material. And so what we want you to do is we want you to look at these characteristics. And once this is on the screen, I'll give you some more direction. So we're going to be honing in on the characteristics of program design, management, and evaluation, okay? And we have this both in English and Spanish. So what I want you to do first, we're going to start with program design. And so you created a space in your illustration for program design. Notice that under program design, we have 9 characteristics. We have 9 characteristics. In your illustration, I want you to put the number that represents that characteristic by that item in your picture. So if you have in your picture the population that the program is serving in that part of your illustration, you'll put a number 2 beside that. If you have in your illustration anything that indicates what kind of problem or issue or focus it is that you're trying to address with that program, if it's evident in your illustration, you would put a number 1 by that particular item in your illustration. If in your illustration there is an indication of what the geographic location is in terms of where that program is delivered, then you would put a number 3 by that part of the illustration. If there's an indication of additional partners or resources that you might be connected with or to in terms of the delivery of this program, if there is any type of other resources in the community that is used to deliver the program, you would put a number 5. That's asset mapping. If there's any part of your illustration under program design related to any similar programs or any complementary programs or services, you would put a number 6. If there's any indication in your illustration of who the program serves, if it's children, if it's women, then you would put a number 7. And especially if in your design of your program, you seek out feedback from the folks that participate in it, you would put a 7 by that item. For number 8, feedback from your community partners. Feedback from your community partners. If you inquire about feedback from your community partners about your program, you would put an 8. And 9 would be if there's any indication in your illustration of how funds are acquired or any indication of funding in item 9. That you would put a number 9 beside that item. So that's under design. That is under design. So under your design illustration, we're looking to see whether or not you have indicated 1 through 9 in that particular part of your illustration. And if we could go back to gallery for a moment, that would be great. Or do I need to stay there because you don't have that in your workbook? Can we put that link in the chat, team? The characteristics.
Or it may
So
just need to
again-
stay up on the screen for a minute.
Oh, okay, we can go back.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can
until
go
they
back.
get the link.
Okay, we can go back to the list. So again, we're focusing on design right now. And we have shared with you 9 characteristics that we want you to consider in the design and implement the design of your program, and looking at the design of your program being in alignment with the mission and vision to meet the needs of the community. So again, we're focused on design right now. Design. And also, if you have your cell phone, you could take a quick picture of this as well and reference it that way. Can I go from this screen now back to gallery? Are we okay? Okay. Awesome. So I want to do just a real quick kind of poll, right? How many of you, and you can just use your thumbs up feature in your reaction, and team, you'll have to help me count these. So how many of you had all 9 of those characteristics under your design, under the design illustration? How many of you had all 9? Anybody? How many of you had 8 of those characteristics? How many of you had 8 of those characteristics? And again, just use your thumbs up reaction. How many of you had 8 of those out of the 9? How many of you had 7 out of the 9? 7. Okay.
I
How many
see
of you?
one.
1, okay.
Mhm.
Thank you, Lisa.
I think one, yeah.
I see Leslie Patterson. Is that the one you
I
see?
saw Megan. I think Megan had hers up.
Okay, so we have
Right.
2. Okay, so
Yeah.
2 had
Mhm.
7 out of the 9.
At least so, yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Okay, I see Dr. Cook Davis. That makes 3, I think. I see a thumbs up there. How many of you had 6 out of the 9? And we're just trying to scan just real
2.
quickly. We don't want to leave anybody out, but
1, 2, 3. I think I see 3.
okay, 3. All right. Someone wants us to put the list up again real quick or send it out in a link. Can you take a picture of it when we put it up real quick? If you, that person, I didn't catch, let me see. If when we put it up, can you take a quick picture of it? How many of you had 6? How many had 6 in the list? You had 6. How many had 6?
1, 2, 3.
Okay.
3, I think. Oops.
There we go. I know it's harder to count when it goes from gallery. And so can we just all just take a quick picture real quick?
It's also now in the chat.
Okay, 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Okay, go back to gallery. All right, so how many had 6? That's where we left off, Lisa.
I think I had seen 3. 1, 2. Now I see 2. I thought we had 3.
Okay. I see 1, 2. I see Leslie Covington and I see April Spencer and I see,
That's it.
okay. Okay. How many have 5? I'm going to speed it up a little bit. How many have 5? Just use your reaction feature. And then we can, Lisa is scanning the room.
I see 2.
Okay. 2, 2, 2. How many of you have 4 of the 9? You have 4 of the 9. 4. Okay.
I don't see anything.
Okay. How many have 3 of the 9?
I saw 1. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
1 for 4. Now
Okay.
we're on 3.
3. How many have 3 of the 9?
Challenging my old eyesight here.
This, I promise you, this is not a test. This is not for a grade. We are not
see.
grading anybody. No judging here.
I think I see 3.
Okay. Okay. How many have 2 of the 9?
1, 2. I think I see 2 quickly.
Okay. Okay. And how many of you have 1 of the 9?
1, 2.
You have at least 1 of
3.
the 9.
I think I see at least 3 or 4.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. So I'm gonna go 4. So in terms of design, when you look at the list of the 9 items that you see here, is there any one of these items that is not clear to you? Is there any one of these items that is not clear to you? Not clear. Like you're like, I don't know what that is. Great girl. Okay. All right. Just don't want to move forward if there's any one item that's there. We tried to make sure we had prompts in there. So when you are designing a program, we are suggesting to consider these characteristics and thinking through the design. Now, you may very well add more, and you can create your own authentic design management and evaluation characteristics. You might have, I think it's important to have this information maybe kind of typed out in a Word document somewhere that is just saved, and you can just refer to it anytime you need to. Because we utilize this information for a lot of different reasons in nonprofit spaces. And so the design then is an important part of the work that we do. We design programs, we design services. And if we're going to evaluate our programs and services, it's important for us to have a framework for designing, right? Once we have designed the program, now we've got to manage it. And so in your management illustration, we're going to go through the same drill. We are going to go through our illustration, and you're going to number for me any indication of community impact in terms of the goals and objectives and the outcomes of this program. So is there anything in your illustration that infers or gives us some inkling that community impact is a part of your management, the management of your program or of your service? The same with staff and volunteers. You're going to indicate that or number that with the number 11, if that's evident in your illustration. Number 12, how you promote your program or service. Is there an indication of that in your illustration? You would put a 12 by that item. Social media, is that in your illustration? For some of our nonprofit organizations, social media has really helped us because oftentimes it doesn't cost a lot. We have to give it time, time on the clock, but we don't necessarily have a high expense oftentimes with the use of social media. You would indicate that with the number 13, and then special events, you would indicate that or note that with the number 14. And then here's fund development again in management. So we consider fund development and fund development strategies a characteristic that we should be mindful of in the design, and also a characteristic that we need to be mindful of in the management. Because if we secure dollars and resources to implement our programs and services, then we also are going to, need to figure out a way to fund them, and we have to manage those funds. And so that's for program management. I'm going to go a little quicker this time, but I want to do the same thing with my polling. So we are starting with characteristic number 10, right? And we're going up to characteristic number 15. And so how many of you have number 10 noted in your illustration? I went in the reverse order this time, or ascending order this time. How many of you have number 10 noted? I'm going a little quicker this time.
Have about 3, I see, I think.
Okay.
3 or go with 4.
Okay, 4. How many have number 11? I see Leslie Covington, her actual hand is up, so.
6 is a lot, 7.
Oh, yes.
Can I just say a lot? No, say about 8. Think about 8.
I see. So it looks like we've got quite a few there. You said 8, Lisa?
Yeah, I think I counted about 8. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And the number 12. So we've got a lot of folks that indicated volunteers and staff.
Mhm.
And so number 12, how many of you have item 12 noted in your illustration? Item 12. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
About 7, 8, about 8.
Okay. Okay. Number 13. How many of us have social media somewhere in the illustration of management? Okay.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
Okay.
a lot. About 12, I think.
Maybe, oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And how many of us have 14 special events that we do related to our to our program. Okay,
7. About 7.
okay, 7. And number 15, fund development. How many of us have that part in,
2,
we should all have that in management, right? And we should all have that in design.
11,
Because
12,
we're, you know,
13,
we're trying to figure out how we're gonna fund the program.
about
Okay,
13.
awesome. Is there any one of 10 through 15 that you say to yourself, I don't know what that is? I don't know what that is. What does that mean? And so on. And again, here is the second part of our content around management. It is important for us when we are implementing a program that we pay attention to how the program is managed. And that is going to be uniquely different. The characteristics of that is going to be different based on what type of program it is as well. Some of our programs are clinical programs, meaning some of our programs are health care related. And some of our programs are not. And so how those programs are managed may very well be influenced by the funding that we receive as well. So we don't want to leave that out, but these are just some ways to kind of frame it. Let's go to evaluation.
You have
Uh-huh.
Reginald asking, is number 10 an assessment or a survey we conduct? That's the
Number
question.
10 is actually the objectives of that program when it hits the community. So it is, what is it that you are trying to accomplish in the community? And that the goals and objectives and the outcomes are authentic. So it's not an assessment, it is determining if it's an after-school program, what is the goal or purpose of that after-school program? And what kind of impact are you trying to make or outcomes are you trying to achieve with that after-school program? Does that help? Okay. Is there any other questions about 10 through 15? Okay. Third part, program evaluation. Same drill. In your illustration related to program evaluation, how many of you have in your illustration your process for doing the evaluation? In terms of the preparing for it, the focus of the evaluation, how the evaluation is conducted. Is there any indication in your illustration for number 16?
Think about 5, I see.
Okay,
6.
okay. What
Leslie
about
gets me with the hands up.
Okay, all right.
I
Okay.
got you, Leslie. I got you.
Okay. And preparing to evaluate. So is there any indication in your illustration that you have some questions that you have determined that need to be answered as a part of evaluating your program? And we'll get into some details about that, but
About 5.
okay, 5. And then the type of evaluation, the focus of your evaluation. And we're going to get into some details about that too. Is there any indication of the focus of your evaluation as it relates to that? I don't see.
I see about 4.
Okay.
5.
Okay, so that is number 18.
Mhm.
And then number 19, data collection, data analysis, interpreting data as it relates to evaluating your program. Is there any indication of that in your illustration?
Got about 5 there too.
Okay. And then number 20, reporting. So reporting out about how the program is doing or how the service is doing. Is there any indication of that in your illustration?
About 5.
Okay, all right. So the content for program design, management, and evaluation is framed around these 20 characteristics. And keep in mind that there your characteristics, you may add more characteristics to this, depending upon the program or service that you are delivering. So as we think about this particular part of the operations, the day-to-day operations of your nonprofit agency, it's real important in terms of the content that we're delivering. It is salient and important for us to think through how our programs are framed and how our programs are communicated in terms of what do we tell people about the programs that we're offering or the programs that we are delivering in our communities. And so once we do that, and again, I encourage us, if we have 20 programs, then we have 20 documents like this. We have 20 documents that we've filled in, that this information is easy to reference, it's easy to access, and we don't have to start over every time we write a grant, or we don't have to start over with logging this information and accounting for this information. We don't have to start over each and every time we need it. It's there and we are updating it as we go. And it helps us to be able to have this stored so that it is not just useful to us as individuals that represent our nonprofits, but it's useful to any stakeholder in the organization that might need this information. Wouldn't this be awesome to give to the person who's designing the brochure? Wouldn't this be awesome to give to the person who's maintaining the social media platforms? Wouldn't this be awesome to give to our board members in a maybe an infographic where they can actually see that this is kind of the elements of our nonprofit? So once we have captured this information, we can utilize it in a whole lot of different ways, and not just for grant writing. It can be used for a lot of different purposes. As you look at the list of 20 characteristics, we are going to hone in on the evaluation part of this. We're going to look very, very specific at evaluation, and the information in your workbook, there is we've emphasized this part of our content today. Before we take a break, I wanted to just get a sense, and I see some comments, Lisa, in the chat. I want to get a sense of whether or not any of you have had any kind of like aha moments as you've worked through this. But let me just ask the group, do we want to explore the answers to your question in the gallery, or would you like to go in breakouts to do it? Give me an idea. If you prefer, we just stay in the gallery and we just kind of hear from each other. Just I see gallery in the chat. Okay, great. All right, I think gallery wins out. So kind of share any aha moments or any just kind of realities as we've gone through this exercise that have surfaced for you. And I'm just going to mute myself. You can unmute and respond. Okay. Just feel free to unmute and mute, unmute, I'm sorry, if you want to share.
I guess I'll go.
And I'll try to respond to the comments that we have.
So I wasn't really thinking of like how to report the success of the program. So I'm thinking of developing a program for our area where we see a lot of need for immigration services. And so I'm in the process of doing that, but I wasn't really thinking of how to report the success because essentially it's going to be we're going to charge a fee that's going to cover the what we're going to pay for the DOJ rep to work on cases. So I wasn't really thinking of how to report the success of how we save clients money, because it's going to be income based. Like if you make below 200, the poverty line, then we're probably going to have a fee scale, and so you'll pay a reduced price as opposed to paying an attorney for an attorney fee. And so I wasn't thinking of those numbers. I'm like, how are we going to, am I going to compare what we charge to what they would normally charge a client, and maybe do we saved this person who is low income this much money by doing the program, or how I wasn't thinking of those numbers. And so now that's starting to run through my head. Like, how are we going to report the success? The program's going to be new. So of course, if we have any clients, we're going to have people who are going to be benefiting from it. But I wasn't really thinking of how are we going to measure those benefits? How are we going to measure those numbers? So this was really helpful in going and taking it back to the board and discussing how to set up parameters and how to think of how we're going to report that.
Thank you.
If I may, because we have a legal clinic and it's a combined, we talk about the impact on number of adults, children that have been serviced. And also we track the volunteer hours from other professionals, such as the pro bono, low services, how many professionals are volunteering their time. And then the success stories, like how many of those families were successfully approved for immigration status adjustment, or the type of clients that have been serviced with this particular clinic. So it can just paint a larger picture of what we're talking about when we're referring to an immigration clinic. And so those are the things that we look at and
if I could add to that, some of you may or may not be familiar with the logic model frame. And that comes to mind for me in Hania's her feedback, that in most United Ways use a logic model way of framing the way in which you would explain to them how you're going to utilize the funds. And so I just want you to pencil, because this is not in your material, but this comes to mind for me. The logic model, a typical logic model in terms of designing and delivering, or designing and managing and evaluating a program, has 4 components to it. Your inputs, so what are you investing? What resources are going into the program? The activities, meaning the work that's actually happening to deliver the program. The outputs, I think you talked about volunteer hours, success stories. Those are your outputs. I'm sorry, the volunteer hours is an output, an example of that. And then your outcomes, which would be those success stories and what difference did it make in the life of the people that you're serving, and being able to capture that. Logic model, you can Google it. You can, you're going to get all kinds of imagery as it relates to that. But oftentimes when framing a program, funders will ask you for logic model type information. And this list of characteristics helps you to build that in terms of that, if you want to kind of connect the dots as it relates to that. But that's what comes to mind when you're explaining, when you were sharing what it is that you all are monitoring and keeping up with, is that logic model concept, using that logic model concept. Some funders and or donors and or even board members hone in on outputs. They want to know, what are the deliverables? In other words, that's what they want to know. And then some want to know, well, yeah, the deliverables are great, but what difference did the deliverables make in the life of those children, or in the life of the families that you serve, or in how the environment is being impacted? So that's a really good, I'm glad you pointed that out. That is a really, that's important. Because that logic model concept is one that is used frequently when it comes to creating and setting up programs. Any other ahas or just kind of, hey, this is something that has come to mind for you as you have learned about these characteristics and how it might be useful?
I'd say the connecting this to, my director of philanthropy should know the answers to these questions, right? As she's writing grants or going out there asking for money. Same thing with our marketing PR team should know this information, right? So that way you're not having to ask people this question every time when you go to do it. This just becomes part of, so I like there are the things that you're doing on the program side, and then there's the who knows internally, who knows this information that it makes it more seamless to engage people externally because multiple people know this information outside of the program team. So that was a good connection to make.
The connection I made was there are people who you pay big money for just to do this, what we just did. And it can be really expensive. But if you have tools like this in place, then you can internally develop your program, follow the success of the program, and make sure that everything from the inputs, outputs, activities, and outcomes are known, and you don't have to spend $50,000 for that to happen for your program. So we can do a lot for ourselves if we take the time and energy and use tools like this.
Thank you.
And to Leslie, your point, do it proactively and it's just there and it's available and you update it as needed, but that way you have that information readily available to be able to share internally and externally. So good point.
Yes, use it for maintenance too, maintenance of new programs.
Any other thoughts before we move into another part of our work about where we are right now? So this does take time, right? It's not but again, if you have 5 programs or services and you have this crafted, it can make other aspects of what you do as it relates to what Andre said about social media folks and our marketing folks and our fund. I mean, minimally, our fund development folks need to have this information. And if we're in our board meetings, if we are reporting out about our programs and services and how we're moving along, the fund development folks could be a part of that and they can hear it along with even all of our board members, or even in your staff meetings. If they're giving an update on programs and services, then everyone can kind of hear those updates. And this information, I would protect this information, have it in a real safe place if you're going to have it electronically, but make it accessible to the people who really, really need to know some of these details. And if they're not working with the program each and every day, there's a little bit of distance between them and what actually happens by way of our programs and services. And so I think that's important. And again, connecting, understanding the characteristics and crafting those in alignment with the logic model framing. Lisa, did you have any comments about any of that, just from a program standpoint, before we move into the program evaluation content?
No, I just was going to go back to, especially with the logic model, just your doing community check-ins are really important. I worked for a nonprofit for 25 years prior to this position. I'm with the center. delivering services to homeless families and children. And one of the things that we always had to keep was assessing was our client need. We can keep developing programs thinking we know what the community needs. But if you don't ask your community or in touch with doing community forums or doing some kind of community connection to know if you're delivering the right services or not, I think you'll find that you'll be more productive in your services and your delivery patterns as you go forth. So just always check in with the community you're serving. Remember, you define your community into whom you're serving. So like I'm in Wake County, my community wasn't just the block of where my agency was living, it was all of Wake County. That we defined as our community. So just keep that in mind as you're putting together your services and delivery method.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So the content that we've covered is one, to look at all the characteristics and to hone in on what's very clear to us, what we have questions about related to design and management. Oftentimes what we find is that a lot of questions and quite a bit of training is normally around the program evaluation part. Like we all kind of wake up dreaming, right, about programs and services that can change the lives of people, for example. And then we kind of put our masterminds together and we come up with how we're going to deliver those programs and how they're going to be managed. But oftentimes it's the program evaluation part of this accountability as it relates to programs and services. Oftentimes that's where the training and the questions and the need for more resources surface from our experience. And so we want to do about 20 to 30 minutes of work as it relates to program evaluation specifically. So we're going to take a break and we're going to come back and we're going to focus on program evaluation specifically. In your workbooks, that is page 44 through 55. So all of that information in your workbook, that's what we're going to be spending our time on in the final leg of our session today, and just really kind of doing a deeper dive into how we can go about evaluating our programs and services. And so team, we're going to take a break. Right now it's 11:53. So let's try to come back at about, I was going to say about two minutes to the top of the hour. And then that'll give me 15-20 minutes to focus on just evaluation. So 11:58, I know those are weird times, but if we could be back by 11:58, that would be great. And then the final part of our learning today will be around program evaluation. So see you at 11:58. We're going to get started. I went ahead and gave us an extra minute. So we're gonna spend some time working as it relates to program evaluation. And one of the things that I will say is that keep it practical when it comes to program evaluation, and practical in the context of the capacity of your organization or your nonprofit to be able to monitor and track, because that's when we do program evaluation, in essence, we are monitoring and tracking the resources that we put into our work or into our programs and services, and we're monitoring and tracking the activities or the work that we're doing, and we're monitoring and tracking the output and ultimately the outcomes. Now, the other part to add is impact. We see our funders and even board members oftentimes are asking us, well, so what is the impact of the work that you're doing? I know when we're meeting as a team related to the Institute, the Nonprofit Management Institute is a service that we do. It's a program of the NC Center, right? And so oftentimes, and as recent as a week or so ago, Lisa asked our team, so what is the impact of delivering the Institute? Like, so how do we capture that? And so this idea of doing evaluation, sometimes it is just about resources that we put in, and are we getting a return on our investment, right? Inputs. Or it's about the work that we do. How efficient are we? How effective are we at the work activities that it takes to deliver the program? And then ultimately too, well, so what are the outputs? What are the deliverables? What is it that we can see as evidence of this, the resources we put in, the work that we're doing? What are the outputs? And then ultimately, and so what difference is it making in terms of outcomes and impact? So in terms of thinking about program evaluation, oftentimes we're asked the question, what is the focus of the evaluation? You know, what is the focus of it? And if you look at page 44, 44 in English, 45 in Spanish, that's what I'm going to be referring to. And 45 in English and 46 in Spanish, 46 in English and 47 in Spanish, 47 in English and 47 through 50 in English, and 48 through 51 in Spanish. So this is where we're going to kind of start, and then we're going to keep building upon more content as we move along. So on page 44, we've given you kind of the definition or description of program evaluation. Keep in mind that evaluating programs, it is a process. And if we don't have certain things in place on the front end, it's very, very difficult for us to be able to accomplish the tasks that we need to perform towards the end. So in terms of thinking about that process, again, if you look at the bottom of page 44, practical, relevant, understandable for your organization and culture, and accurate. So we want to be thinking in those, and we could add another one, which is useful, right? We want the evaluation to be useful to us. And so in terms of thinking about that. So what is the process? Page 45. What is the process? We have to prepare to evaluate. We have to focus the evaluation. Then we have to conduct the evaluation, and then we report out the results and findings. Or you could change that to say, we report out the outputs, the outcomes, and the impact, because that's what we're reporting out. We're reporting out the outcomes or the outputs, the outcomes, and the impact. So in terms of thinking about what we are reporting, and that is, I'm just cross-referencing the logic model frame, because again, oftentimes our funders, that's what they, that's how they kind of size us up in terms of what we're able to show them as a result of spending the funds that we've spent. So that's important to keep in mind. So we prepare for the evaluation, we focus the evaluation, we conduct the evaluation, and we report the results and findings. And our results and findings are oftentimes reported as outputs, outcomes, and/or impact. Lisa, did you have anything to add to that at all?
Doing good. Nope.
All right, great, thanks. So let's just keep moving through our material. And as Lisa shared before, she has extensive experience in the oversight of a whole lot of programs and services being delivered simultaneously. And so please, if you have questions or you have thoughts as we're moving through this, we may very well have examples that we can share with you to kind of help you in this space of evaluation. So when you're getting geared up to evaluate a program or a service, it's important for us to take into consideration some questions, right? In terms of designing the evaluation. And we don't want to design an evaluation process that that we don't have the capacity to deliver on. So we want to make sure that we have the capacity to deliver. So one question that's important to consider is, what is the purpose of the evaluation that you're doing for this program? So what is the overarching purpose? Who is going to get the information from the evaluation? What is it that we need in order to make decisions about the individuals that we're serving? What kind of information do we need? What are the sources in terms of where this information can be gathered? Because we may find that the gathering of information about, let's just say, the people we're helping or assisting or supporting, it may be sources that are gathering information as well that are not within our organization, but we may be able to access that information. How can that information be collected? What is the information? When is the information needed? So how often do you need to be able to access this information, and what resources are available to collect it? So these are just some kind of prep, what we call evaluation prep questions to begin thinking about. If you look at page 47, we've actually given you, to focus the evaluation, we've given you a worksheet to do that. And so notice in the worksheet, we have a space for how many programs? And you can use the chat or you can unmute. How many programs do we have space for in our worksheet? Scott is holding up 3, Reginald's holding up 3. Yes, we've got space for 3 programs. So here's that first question. Why are we doing the evaluation? Real practical here. Not heavily scientific, right? Just in a practical sense, why are we doing the evaluation for program A, B, or C? What exactly are we evaluating? Are we evaluating outputs? Are we evaluating outcomes? Are we evaluating impact? What are we evaluating? Who will use the information? Once we do the evaluation, who will use it? When will the evaluation be complete? And how will we conduct the evaluation? Will we interview people? Will we do surveys? Will we look at existing documents and data that we have? How will that happen, and how will that take place? So this is what I love about the team. Always hears me say, I love these handouts. These are just great. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Because it is for each of these areas in the worksheet, we have supporting resources to help you to answer the question, okay? So when you go to page 48, focusing the evaluation. Why are we conducting this evaluation? What exactly are we evaluating? And who will use the information provided by the evaluation? So we've got some prompts here for you that you can use for program A, B, and C that you would be completing on page 47. And again, we're keeping it practical, right? Because there are other individuals within your organization that may actually be able to help you answer the question, depending upon the job they have or depending upon the position that they have in the organization. The type of evaluation, go to page 49. So once again, we're looking at, why are we conducting this evaluation? What exactly are we evaluating? So what type of evaluation is it that we are going to craft? I will go ahead and tell you, while we have an evaluation that's focused on goals, and we have an evaluation that's focused on process, or we could have an evaluation focused on outcomes, the evaluation could be eclectic, meaning it could have aspects of all 3 of these. It makes it a little bit more complex when you do have layers upon layers upon layers that you're trying to evaluate. So that's why we always say, keep it practical, because this thing could grow to be humongous in terms of our evaluation plan for a program. So goals-based, we're looking at whether or not we're achieving the goals and objectives. Remember, this was one of the characteristics of a program. Process, are we evaluating our delivery method or our delivery approach? That could very well be true. And or outcomes. And again, you notice I keep saying it could also be outputs and impact. So in terms of thinking about the type of evaluation, here's another one of my favorite pieces of this information. On page 50, we have accompanying questions to go along with the type. So when you're trying to determine for program A, what type of evaluation is this going to be, or do we need it to be? These are the types of questions that a goal-based evaluation answers. These are the types of questions that a process evaluation answers, and these are the types of questions that an outcomes evaluation answers. Oftentimes, funders will ask you, especially for grants, what is your evaluation plan? And this is where this actually comes in handy with that. How will we analyze the data once we have acquired it? How will we analyze that data? Some data that we collect is qualitative data, and some data that we collect is quantitative data. So it just kind of depends on your approach and what your focus is going to be related to analyzing the data. Now, here's one of my other favorite pieces of information, because it's right there at your fingertips, right? So you might ask yourself, well, how do I collect data? What do I use? So some of the methods that we have for you are, in some cases, you're collecting data by way of questionnaires and surveys and checklists. And some of your programs do case management. And so some of that data you might be gathering in the intake process or the enrollment process, because you're gathering that data anyway. And so if you're gathering that data anyway, then what does that data, or what can that data tell you about the program if you pay attention to that over the course of a year or 2 years or 3 years or months, for that matter? Interviews are a good way to collect data. Reviewing documents, which is like intake and enrollment information. Sometimes it's observation, sometimes it's focus groups, and sometimes it's case studies. So in terms of thinking about the collecting of the data. So then once you have it, you may ask yourself, well, how do I interpret the data? I've got all this data, so how do I interpret it? What we've shared with you on page 53 is that if you're doing a goal-based evaluation, you can compare results. If you're doing a process evaluation, you can look at the description of your programs and you can determine strengths and weaknesses and those types of things in terms of the process. If you're focusing your evaluation around outcomes or outputs or impact, you can look for indications of accomplishing those and actually being able to identify what those are. So once you have the data in hand, you can interpret that data, okay? On page 54, what we have is once you have gathered all your information, your data, you've evaluated it or you've reviewed it, you have determined what you want to share. Now it's time to put it in a report form. And the way in which you report has a lot to do with your nonprofit, and then also it could be related to your funders. But if you capture this in a unified way, and if you're doing an annual report every year, then you're probably looking at this kind of information anyway. Then this is just what we provided here for you is a table of contents of how this information can be documented. Now, that was a whole lot, and I'm not trying to overwhelm you, but I wanted you to just kind of, at first, to see the full scope of this evaluation, So if you go back to page, in your workbook, if you go back to page 45, preparing to evaluate, focusing the evaluation, conducting the evaluation, and then reporting the outputs and outcomes and or impact and what that looks like. And that can be different based on the audience that you are sharing the results and findings with. On page 55, we just listed some examples of who you might be sharing the evaluation with. It may be the staff, it may be the board, it may be funders, it may be the clients, it may be the public, it may be a combination of all of these. So when you're thinking about reporting out the evaluation or the program evaluation, this is where this comes in handy. So again, think about it in 4 pieces: preparing, focus, conducting, reporting out. And there's a question in the chat about how often, at least annually. Some of your programs report out monthly. I mean, it's not a comprehensive maybe report, but some of your programs have advisory councils and program committees, and you're reporting out on a regular basis. My question to you would be, are you reporting out using a consistent framework, or are you just reporting out? Because we want to be using a consistent framework, because that's a way of building the capacity of our audiences to learn how we report out as it relates to our programs. I don't know if there are any other questions in the chat, but this evaluation process,
You see, Reginald's asking, who is generally involved in this task of conducting the evaluation?
One of the primary entities is the staff that's delivering the program. Right? Primary. If you, or volunteers, because it could be volunteers that are doing that. And then it depends on the structure of your nonprofit. I don't know how many staff people you have, or if it's just one person and it's the executive director, then you've got to determine, who's going to kind of lead it. But then you have to decide, well, who can feed into providing the information that you need, or gathering the information that you need to evaluate the program. In a lot of our organizations, we will have program coordinators or directors. There's a point person for the program who's responsible for overseeing everything related. So that's a way to structure it, and that is commonly used.
Boy, I was thinking back to the days when I was doing this, and I remember one of my experiences, which, I'm sure you all have been there, what is it? Bad data in is not, what is that saying? What's the saying?
Garbage out.
Thank you. Say it again.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Thank you.
That's it.
Right. And we had a database system that we had to put, so a lot of the information for evaluating something would depend on the, staff putting information in the system. Then you get all this stuff and you have to make sense of it. And so it was a staff effort on my end, because the case managers were doing, the frontline work, had to gather the information. If they're not doing it good on their end, or taking down good notes, or, it makes the evaluation end a little bit harder to gather good information to evaluate. So just, I'm not saying it's easy, but it takes time to make sure. So I found it easier to do it on a monthly instead of waiting to the end of a year to do something. It just made a lot, either monthly or quarterly, one of the two, to make it a little easier. I was like, boy, you brought me back to heebie-jeebies, Dr. Palmer, thinking about that. I'm like, ooh.
And so I can relate so well, because my background is mental health case management. And so my master's is actually in counseling. And so, I just remember those days of having to put case notes in a data system and all of that. And if that data system isn't set up, once we put all that data in, if it wasn't set up, that we could retrieve from that the information that we needed to tell our story, if you will, about our work, then it was just data. It really didn't serve us well. And so the data system is important, that you're collecting that data and storing that data. I'll just go real practical. When you enroll a child in your after-school program, or when you do an intake if it is a social service or a health service or a mental health service or something like that, and you've got 20 items in that intake form, all of that's data.
Mhm.
All of that information is data. The question is, what type of data is it in alignment with the evaluation that you're doing? So is it goal-based data? Is it outcome data? Is it output data? You know, how do you define what the data is? And then that helps you to know how you can use it. So that's just real important. And again, practical. If you have Microsoft Office, you have Microsoft Excel. That's a data software. You can, if you have some folks that are savvy and very skilled in using Excel to start, not unless your funder or some other entity that you are accountable to has you in a portal or in a database of their own, then you can begin with that to begin to kind of store that information. Yeah, there's everyone's they went away real quick.
Everyone's interpretation of the data categories is key.
Right, right.
Be the same.
And so you want to have a key, K-E-Y. You want to have a glossary or a key that everybody understands what they're looking at and how you're utilizing that data in terms of interpretation. So
And defining success is really important.
Mhm.
Like, everyone, it looks different to everyone. And nonprofits I found over the years, we really don't have a measure as national standard measurement of success where we can
That's
say, oh, 80% of this is the standard for, I mean, it's really hard to define in a nonprofit world. So you have to educate the world on what your standard is and what you go by.
Yes,
Mhm.
very important.
Yep.
And that helps the board of directors too. It helps them to provide oversight because then they know what they're looking at as they're looking at programs. They have a way to understand it.
Right.
So I want to take you back to page 47, the worksheet. Think about that program or go back to that program that you put in your illustration. Go back to the program that you put in the illustration. How would you like to evaluate this program, right? So you could do program B, which is the program in your illustration, and just briefly answer the question. Why would you conduct an evaluation for this particular program that's in your illustration as program B? What would you be evaluating for that program that's in your illustration? Who will use the information provided by the evaluation of that program in your illustration? When will the evaluation be complete? And better yet, when does it need to be complete? So how often do you need to have gone through an evaluation process? And then how will you actually conduct the data collection of what it is that you need in terms of that? And as we say about all of the fundamental management functions of a nonprofit, you have to determine where you are as an organization. What is your capacity in terms of doing evaluation for your programs and services? Operate within the capacity that you have. It's not healthy to design an evaluation plan in which you don't have the capacity to implement. So keep in mind as you're making these determinations, the capacity of your programs. So we did a check-in around program design and program management. The last thing I want to do with you before we close out is I want to get a real quick check-in as it relates to the program evaluation part. Right now you're thinking, right now you're feeling what? And then once we finish that, I'll pass it back to my teammates and they'll do the official close and let you know what you need to be thinking about for next week. So right now you're thinking what? Right now you're feeling what? Program evaluation. Or the whole topic, the whole program design, management, and evaluation. Right now you're thinking what? Right now you're feeling what? I see, look at Scott's
Scott's-
emoji. Look at Morgan.
Have a lot of work to
Man, where are
do.
you all finding these emojis? I haven't seen these before.
Have a lot of work to do. Got all the tools in the toolbox. Need to refocus some of our evaluation methods, making some changes.
Be patient with yourself.
Thankful. Seems like I need to revisit the timeframes for regular evaluations. Good direction. More work to do. Mhm. Make more time to do this. Yeah, make more time. You hear that, Dr. Palmer? More time. Where do you
I
find more
see that.
time?
I see it. You know, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to use an example. This is probably not a good metaphor, but I'm going to use it anyway. It's kind of like taking your car into repairs to get repairs done, and you go in and say, I need an oil change. And then they bring it back, you go pick it up, and they go, oh, we changed your oil, but we see all of these other things that you need to focus on. And a lot of times they'll say, well, you don't have to worry about this one right now.
Now,
You
yeah.
can wait a little while to work on it. Okay, so that's probably not a good example, but that was the example that came to mind for me. You know, be patient with yourself. Like I said before, you have to determine your own cadence with enhancing capacity. And we're here to be informative, and we're here to share with you ways forward. And so don't be too hard on yourself, Scott.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to pass this over to my teammates, and it was so great working with you today. I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. Yes, evaluations. That's a good one. So here we are, almost 12:30. Just to give you an idea, and since we were talking about evaluation, why our post-session follow-ups are very important. We'll be putting our link as usual. Please take the time to fill them out. It's again, as Dr. Palmer spent most of our session talking about, evaluation is important to us. We want to make sure we're improving areas that you give us suggestions on to improve. Our next upcoming sessions will be on strategic planning. Another good one to have, which will, again, you'll find that all of these topics are interrelated. So you'll be hearing some of the same points and processes brought up again in some of the things going forward. So if there isn't anything else, and I guess we can say farewell and see you guys next week. Go get some lunch. Feed those brain cells that you just dumped out. See you next week. And we can have staff and thank you, interpreters, as well. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be with us back again next week.